Good evening, community. Thank you for coming tonight. At this time, we're going to begin our board workshop session. Please understand that tonight's workshop is going to be led in part by the SES study team, who will be here to give the report from the focus group that occurred several weeks ago. During this particular session of the workshop, please understand that this is a board workshop, so it's a workshop that's done in public. This is not a public comment session, but during the board meeting, there is a public comment session where if the public wishes to talk or to speak, the board will have comment at that time. So we will have the workshop portion. They'll present the findings, and then the board will ask questions. And then once that portion of the meeting is done, we're scheduled to go into our next section. Okay? Again, this is a board workshop in public. This is not a public comment section, but there is a public comment section during the board meeting time. Okay? Thank you and welcome. And I'd like to introduce board for you tonight. Back with us, Dr. Paul Seversky and Mr. Doug Exley from the SES study team.
Thanks for inviting us. We appreciate seeing you again. We've been working and talking with each other since last January. See how important this is? It takes a long time to get to the point where you and your community have data to have family discussion of what might be best for the future of your kids and your school district and your community. This weekend we provided the report of the community focus group, which met on October 1. If you remember, we were supposed to meet with the focus group a week before that, but you had homecoming, so Mathis called and said, gee, can we readjust? And we absolutely could. And the reason I bring that up is because normally the focus group report is provided to our clients within 7 days. Unfortunately, I was out of town, so I couldn't get it till the 15th, so we apologize for that, but that's the reason why. So, with that, thanks again for having us, and we go through, you've already had it, nothing new here, and we'll have Doug begin and talk about the technique and the research technique of the focus group.
Thanks, Paul. The first part of what we'll do is I'm actually just going to walk through the document that you have, and for the public that's here, they can do the same thing. You had the documents available out in the hallways, so the same thing that I'm talking to you about, they'll be able to look along and see exactly what the focus group was about and what we did. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll start right on the front cover of the document. You can see here the report of our community meeting, the focus group, was held on October 1st. And as you can see, it was to deal with the perceptions about the opportunities and challenges reported in the pre-kindergarten through grade 12 program delivery study. What's important for us that's on the front of this document, that's really on every single document that we use and share with the board, is the guiding question that we had for the study. And that is, are there options that might provide more cost-effective ways or patterns to organize how the pre-K-12 program is implemented, delivered over the next 3 years? That study question really gets at the heart of what we try to do in providing the research for you. As we've said with all of our work with you, the goal that we had was to provide you with as much information and data as we possibly could. It was not for us in any of these documents, either through the program delivery study or through the focus group study, to come in and give you recommendations of what we think you should do. That's not our job, that's not our purveyance, that's not what we were looking to do. That's something for the board, the leadership team, and the community to do. What we really hoped is that through the research tools that we have, that what we would be able to do for you and community is to provide you different types of data to look at, different types of options to examine, and see what might be best for you and the students of Wayne over the long term. So that's the beginning of this, and again, that's why that research question is really so important for us. If you'll turn to the inside of that front page, you'll see the roster of the people that were on the focus group. And what we were looking for here and what we felt the board did a great job on was really helping us to get a diverse group of people who were residents of the district. These were community people, these were staff members, people from all different walks of life that would be part of this one day. And it was really important for us to have these different perspectives, so as we were going through the study and going through the options, we could hear and transcribe the different types of ideas that people had from their individual perspectives. So we wanted to thank the board. We thought the group that we had to work with was a very strong group. It was a very diverse group, and it helped us as we tried to move forward and review the options. Next, if you want to just peek over to the table of contents, you can just see how the document is laid out. You'll see the preface that I'll talk about in just a second. We do list the 5 scenario options so that there is a synopsis of those options. Obviously, we go in much greater detail in the program delivery study. I know that's been up on your website, and there have been copies of that made available for your public. We have the rank ordering that we'll talk about. Later on, Paul will discuss some of the major observations and suggestions of the work that came out of this. And then we have additional opportunities and challenges that were identified by the focus group. Those are also listed in this document. And then we do have some appendices that we can look at from that particular day. So what we have here is the background of all the work that we were involved with, and it lays out exactly what's on in this final tool for you. This is the final research tool that we are providing to the board, and one obviously that's very important. If you'll take a look at the preface on the next page, at the top you can see what it does is it talks a little bit about the background of what we were doing, and again there you see it all throughout the work. There is that guiding question that's there, because that question is really about everything that you were looking at and what we were trying to do for you. On this particular page, the public can see, and this has been available previously, we were involved in March with a work with the board on a planning to plan, where we took you through a process to rank order what important issues there were for you to look at with the study. These are presented here, and the public can see them, what the board worked on, and you can see that there's numbers rank order 1 through 17. I think it's important to take a quick look at 1 through 10, because 1 through 10 really helped us and provided guidance for us as we looked at the program study and as we looked at how we would work and eventually lead to the focus group part of the study. So if you take a look at this, you can see the responses that the board had to the key questions and data topics that were identified. The first one was, are there better or other ways to configure how we serve the various grade levels? That was your number 1. Are there better other ways to reconfigure the school day? 2. Are we using pupil capacity, which we now have effectively and efficiently? 4. What factors should we consider in examining how a particular building is utilized or not? 5. Are there spaces that can be rented to other agencies? 6. What might future enrollments look like at Wayne? 7. Are we deploying staff directly involved with instruction efficiently? 8, what might be the cost benefit of each of the possible scenario options that are proposed in the study? 9, what are class size section numbers compared to class size section goals? And 10, for the various scenarios, what might be the attendance area boundaries? These were all critical questions, and when we looked at the research that we were putting together, they really helped to provide structure for us as we were looking at the program delivery study and as we looked forward to the focus group work to help guide us in the work of that particular group. In preparation of our work, this came about in March. We also provided to the board back in March, again this is online for the public, we had a pupil capacity study of each of your school buildings. In May, we developed and worked on an enrollment projection and a demographic study, again available to everyone in the district. And then, of course, in June, we presented the program development study to the board, the staff, and the community. And just very briefly, in that program delivery study, just as a synopsis, what we did was we identified the option scenarios. We came up with 5 different scenarios. But just as importantly, what we also did was we identified various options to redeploy current resources. And in this manner, what we did was we looked at how you might use resources differently to enhance student learning and or reduce general fund expenditures without reconfiguration of the buildings. So there are really 2 parts to that as you go back and as you look at that program delivery study. Yes, there's scenarios A through E, and that's clearly what the focus group was involved with, but also there were different ideas about what could you do with current resources and how might you use them differently. So they were also a key part of it. All of that work led to the work in October where we got the focus group together and they did the work that you see in front of you here. If you keep looking along, if you take a quick look at page 4, this is just a quick guide, and certainly for the public that is here this evening, you can see here, all of this is in much more detail in the actual program delivery study, but for here you can see these are the 5 scenarios that were developed in this study. And so you can see A, B, C, D, and E. In the program delivery study for the public, if you haven't had a chance to see all of it, what's available there are descriptions of each of the scenarios, breakdowns of opportunities and challenges, what type of cost factors would be involved with it, how it might impact staffing. All of those are part of it. But for our purpose for tonight, with the focus group study, what we wanted to do is just have this here so that there was a synopsis of it. All right, so now all of this work then led up to what we did with the focus group. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you wouldn't mind, board, and for everyone that's here, if you could skip ahead to page 21. We'll come back to page 5 in just a minute. Okay. If you're at page 21, what you can see here, this is the letter that we sent out to people that you selected as the board to be on the community focus group. We have a very structured process when we do the focus group, and it's very important for us as we move forward with the focus group that the people that are involved have a very clear understanding of what the day will be. So you can see right at the top of that letter on page 21, you can see the goal for that day. Our goal was to provide representation of all residents, taxpayers, and stakeholders. So you had a representative group, and this is why we specifically asked for the different constituencies that we had for the focus group so that it would give you this wide range of representation, and that's really key for a good focus group. Our purpose, as you can see, for that day was to listen, record ideas, perceptions regarding the findings of the program study. So what you have for the day, and I know Mathis was there and several of the board people were there for a little while on that Saturday, it's a very structured process to identify additional opportunities and challenges that are related to the scenario options. So if you go back, and again for the public, if you go back to the program delivery study and if you look at the opportunities and challenges that we came up with those opportunities and challenges as guest outsiders. We are non-biased. We don't have specific bents as far as how we think one thing should go or another thing should go. We clearly have an outsider's view in looking at the information. This, we think, is very, very important. But at the same time, it's also very, very important to have a representative group of the people in your community look at the information, look at the scenario options, and say, well, yes, those may be some opportunities that you see, those may be some challenges that you see, but we think that these could be opportunities and these could be challenges. So what we did and what our purpose was to take that information through structured group work, get all that information together, and eventually come up with a rank ordering of it. In that leads to the outcome that we had for that very structured day for you, the board, sitting up here tonight. That outcome was to provide this one last final research tool that would gather the data to help the board and community as you continue the deliberations for your program, your grade level configurations, and the use of your district facilities. Because now what you have enrollment data, you have demographic data, you have pupil capacity data of each one of your buildings. You have 5 scenario options that are potential options that you could look at. You have information to examine about how you might use current resources differently. How could you, in effect, use that money in different ways to enhance your learning or to save money for the district? So this was all part, as what you can see, of the letter that we send out, and we detail for the people coming into that group the process of what we'll be involved with. And that was all explained on page, as you can see it on page 21. And then if you turn the page to 22, you can just see the back of it. And again, what we do here in preparation for the focus group, we let the people know, please take time, look at the documents that are already out there. And it seemed as if people had a good handle on that. They'd looked at it, they brought them with them. They had examined the information, so they came forward with a good knowledge base. If a focus group is going to be successful and provide you with good information, it's important that all of this information prior goes out in a clear, concise manner. We tried to do that through all the different research tools we gave you, and you did an outstanding job making sure that it was up on your web, copies were available, and people could look at that. So that was the letter that went for the board. For those of you that weren't able to be there the whole time, you can see on page 23, and again for the public that's here, we have an actual, this is the agenda of that day. Again, it's a very, very structured day. So as you can see, if you turn to page 23, this was the day that took part. It began at 8:30, and we went. Actually, I think we went to maybe 3 or maybe 3:15. We were a little bit long on this, but we were able to get through everything, and we were able to rank order the information. Again, if you look at the agenda, you can see. I hate to be too redundant, but I think it's important. You can see the study question. Again, that guides everything that we do, and so there it is. If you look at further down in the agenda, what we did is we talked about our role as guest outsiders. Again, our role throughout the process has really been to try and give you information and hold a mirror up to that data so that you can see what it looks like in an unbiased and unmassaged manner. And that's really what we've tried to do. We don't believe that it's our role to come in again and to tell you whether it's through the background research or whether it's through the program delivery or whether it's through this work with the focus group. We don't believe it's for us to tell you what to do. This is your district, these are your pupils, and this is your money. But what we do try and make sure we're able to accomplish for you is to give you as much data and information as possible to help you with these difficult decisions. And, make no bones about it. As you know, and your public and everyone else that's dealing with this, whenever you're dealing with these types of issues, these are difficult issues. They're fraught with high emotion. It deals with kids, it deals with buildings, and it's very, very difficult. So the best thing that you can do, we believe, as a board and a community, is to get as much information as possible. And when Paul and I, when we were driving up here in preparation for this, and we were just thinking about some different ideas, one of the things that we thought about was that we really we have to commend you, the board, Mathis, and your leadership teams and community for gathering the type of information that you are. You've had a financial study by Rick Timms, who does an excellent job around the state. You've had architects come in and look at some of the brick and mortar information. You're gathering that. You've been involved with us for several months looking at enrollment, demographics, looking at pupil capacity, getting this program delivery study. So we really have to commend you for taking a wide open look at these difficult issues. You're getting a lot of information, and that can only help you no matter what you do. That can only help you and the community to know that you're gathering as much information as you possibly can with this difficult issue. So with that, again, what we did here, we shared with the group the goals and the purpose and what we were trying to do. You can see that what we said on page 23, we showed what the day provided for them, the work that it would be, and we explained that it is a highly structured day. We had to move it along. It had to be, very, very quickly moved through to make sure we could get to the end result. What's difficult for people sometimes when they're on a focus group is to understand that it's not a hearing or a forum. A lot of people come on these things and they think, focus group, well, that means I can just come in and, I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. And that's not what a research tool focus group is. Focus group takes representative people, examines a hypothesis, has specific methodology to come out with an outcome, and that's what we did with this focus group. So it was not a hearing or a forum. It was not a time to hear from just one or two people. We set the groups up in the focus group to make sure that there's broad representation and broad voice so that everybody has a chance to talk when they're involved with the focus group. Really what we let people know, and it's what you're doing tonight, is that the focus group is not a time for personal statements or their beliefs about one thing versus another. That's for you, in-house, the board. Our job with the focus group was to try and find out what other additional opportunities and challenges might there be to those scenario options. And so that's what we did. If you look at 24, the back of the agenda, you can go through this and see this is the process that we had, and you can see the little charts that we have. We're big on colors and moving things around and all this to try and make sure that people are involved. So we had different teams. We mix the teams up, we mix them and match them, and then we try and see by putting fresh brains on the topic, are there different viewpoints that might come out? And then that way we find ways of everybody getting a chance to step up and talk about what they think about the different scenarios. So that was our process, and as we did all of this, we ended up with the final result where we had all of the listings on the walls of the different opportunities and challenges that people had talked about. And then we had another area where they didn't pertain directly to A through E, but we put those up so that they could be recorded and put them in the report. So as Paul will show in a minute, we have the rank ordering, but what we also do is we have some different ideas that came out as a result of the focus group work. So now, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd skip back to page 5, this is really what all of this preface leads to. All of that work that we've done over the past many months, all of the enrollment work, the demographic work, the program delivery work, all of your work with us, our work with the focus group led to this rank ordering. And we have a specific process that we go through with the rank ordering where each person, they have their own rank order that they can do. And we have a matrix that goes through this. And just so that the public's aware, it might be helpful how this works. But we have a matrix that goes through this. Every single person that was on the focus group in private, so without any judgment from a team member or anything else in the privacy of their table. They took A through E and they went through the matrix, and then they put down a series of numbers. And then once they were done, then those were recorded. And actually, just to make sure, Paul and I don't do the recording, and we don't add the numbers up. So it's all done by the people that are there. So the people came up, we had a couple volunteers, and then they added everything up so that we could get this rank ordering. And so what they came up with is what you see here. So the first rank order, in looking at, again, the question, are there options that might provide more cost-effective ways or patterns to organize pre-K-12 program is implemented, delivered over the next 3 years? The top ranking of the community focus group was A. K-5 at OP and Free Will, continues 6-8 at the middle school, 9-12 at the high school. This would mean that OE was not available for pupils. The second high ranking was scenario D. Here you had K-4 at OP and at Free Will, 5-8 middle school, 9-12 high school, do not use OE for pupils. Rank 3 was scenario B. You would serve K-5 at OE and at Free Will Elementary. Again, continuous 6-8 at the middle school, 9-12 at the high school. You would not use OP under B. The fourth rank of the community focus group was C. Here, K2 is at OP, 3-5s at OE. Continue 6-8 at the middle, 9-12 at the high. Do not use Free Will under scenario C. That was number 4. And then number 5, the last of the ranking was E. And under E, K2 was at OP, served grades 3, 6, and intermediate elementary, and at the middle school buildings, serve all secondary 7, 12 at the high school. Don't use OE or Free Will for pupils. So, at the end of that afternoon, as a culmination of all that work with this representative body of resident taxpayers from your district, through the process that we went through, this was the rank ordering that they came up with. A, D, B, C, and E, as you can see here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
The other aspect of the focus group, as we listened and moved around the room and listened to folks as they asked us questions, as well as asked each other questions and looked and actually used the various studies as prime documents in their discussions. Here are some major observations and suggestions that we saw of the discussion work of the community focus group. First, there was acknowledgement concerning the estimated enrollments for the future. They are estimates. They could be wrong. The likelihood that they are is slim, though. However, it's America. Things happen, all right? As you remember, we gave a low, mid, and high enrollment projections. We don't even suggest which one you should use. That really has to be guided by the value judgments of you and your community. Is the glass half empty? Is it half full? Or is it overflowing? That really has to be looked at by you and your outlook for the future. However, in saying that, the enrollment projection study, which, as you know, these are separate studies on purpose because a lot goes into them. The enrollment projection study, if you go back and look at it, looks at your demographics. Your median age is getting older. There is no documented major residential construction for the foreseeable future in your district. That doesn't mean it won't happen, but there isn't any major. When we talk about major, we're talking 80 to 150 to 200 housing units over the next 5 years. That, based on our interviews with codes folks and planners of your towns, that's not in the foreseeable future. So those are the kinds of things that go into that. We're pretty secure in recommending to you that the low, mid, or high and the rationale behind each are pretty solid as far as a planning tool over the next 3 to 5 years. Please remember that any enrollment projections for elementary are only good for 5 years out, and you know why, because beyond that, those cherubs aren't born yet, so you can't estimate them. And however, for your middle years, they exist. So therefore, for middle years, the enrollment projections are valid and for 8 years out. And for secondary, they're valid for 10 years out because, right, you can literally almost go count them. And that's important to note. And that's why often school districts will, at least every other year, and not necessarily through us, you do it, however, redo the enrollment projections because live birth patterns are critical to estimating what future elementary enrollments might look like. Okay? So, there was an acknowledgement, and we heard, and what we mean by acknowledgement, it's not agree or disagree, but in listening, as we rotated and listened to folks, we heard the theme, and we call it acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that the school buildings and the school district are an important part of the culture and life of the area served by Wayne Central School. That was clear in the discussion. That was in a very meaningful way, so that's why we've documented that. Also, there was acknowledgement that some of the scenarios require some major attendance zone changes. And as folks looked at the different, we heard them use the study because in the opportunities and challenges sections that we created for each of the scenarios, we clearly identified in the relevant scenarios that in order to achieve equity of class sizes between two similarly configured elementary buildings, there would need to be extensive decision-making about the attendance zones of those two similarly configured elementary buildings to balance the number of children to allow class size equity between and among first grades here, first grades here, to be as close as possible. Okay? And we saw that, and as they discussed that, so we put that there. That this is another important aspect. We heard this too. Even though the study, as you know, is very conservative, we only utilize spaces in the analysis and in the suggestion of scenarios that are now used for classrooms. In addition to, as we say in the study, your principals have done a great job. My favorite way of describing that, day one of principal school, is every new principal learns you never turn the lights off to a room, you never turn it into storage, and you figure out somehow to use it for kids. Your principals have done a great job of that, okay? However, and there's no however to that, but given your enrollment, you have a series of instructional support rooms that are over the number that typically you would have for this size population. Is it wrong? Of course not. As we said, figure out, do every nook and cranny, help kids. But if you had more enrollment, some of these support spaces would, we actually asked the principals, which rooms would you use if you suddenly had another 25 or 100 children, what would you do? And they would identify various rooms. In fact, some over-identified, and we said, well, we appreciate that, but we think we need to be more conservative, because you just never know. So, again, all of the rooms that are currently used for instruction and some rooms that clearly, in a very conservative way, would be available for classroom sections if you had the enrollment. All right? So, there's that. Also, we listed the functional operating goals of the district. So this, folks saw and understood that the scenarios, as well as any of the program delivery options we described in the study, not necessarily the scenarios, but how to deploy staff maybe differently, was based on an important key foundational item, and that's the class size goals of the district, which were provided to us by the district. Then, oh, I know, this is important. Even though what I said to you earlier about support staff, it was important, it was important under their mind that whatever scenario was achieved, then you'll see that acknowledgement that whatever scenario is option, if any, and that's, we always say that, because you may not, that is implemented by the board, it is important to have enough flexibility to provide both instructional support services with quality and within the class size goals of the district. So we make sure that, because we heard that, and we're obligated that that needs to be put there, so it's there, as it should be, in our opinion. Then we also, on page 7, acknowledgement that as a board focuses in on likely scenarios to implement, more details about the filing items should be developed. This ties into, there is a feeling that, gee, you know, this is important, this takes some time. And there was, the theme here is that in choosing a scenario, there's an important set of planning time that really as many details as humanly possible are identified, discussed, and shared with folks. We heard that. So therefore, for example, how each shortlisted, if there was a short list by the board, you know, 2 or 3 you focused in on, you know, making sure how it addressed service to special needs, you know, digging deeper within the family, that being the board, the community, and the staff, making sure that how special needs pupils would be served. That what would be the process to implement a scenario option, if any option is implemented, should be well planned and not rushed. We put quotes around that because we heard that word. So we wanted to document that. That folks, it was important to folks that, okay, but let's make sure we're not rushed. So that's why that's there. And identify possible, and again, until, you know, a scenario actually happens and your CEOs of your buildings, called your principals, really are given the task, this is what we're going to do, but some identify possible room assignments and scheduling plans if applicable. Okay, some kind of picture of what it might be like. Okay, we heard that. That's why it's there. We also, this we heard too, because in the study, as you remember when we've met with you before, and it's in the major study, we identify, and Doug referred to it earlier, we identify from our point of view of 90 years as teachers, principals, superintendents, we held up a mirror and we identified some possibilities of how you might be able to redeploy staff to do more for your children. Again, that judgment call of might redeploy and do more for your children really rests with you, but as guest outsiders, we felt obligated. That's why you hired us. Do we walk on water? Do we know all the answers? No, but we do have expertise of being able to look at a delivery of instruction and make suggestions of how you might want to look at that differently. Do you have to? Absolutely not. You can do what you want with your community. However, we identify some things, and if you remember, we identified some things like, and that's why this is here. In fact, a couple of the folks had suggested, gee, they read that and they saw, that makes sense. For example, if you remember, there could be, like right now, in one of your buildings, you have, you're well below your class size goals, and if I remember correctly, it's about $450,000 to $480,000 worth of staffing that would not be if you were at your class size goals. Do you have to change it? Absolutely not. On the other hand, if you have a goal and you're well below that goal and you're expending $450,000 to $480,000 of public funds, which is pretty limited. I mean, our public funds for schools is limited, what can I say? Got to have what we can for kids and get every penny we can to help kids. So therefore, not that there's anything wrong with what you're doing. On the other hand, if you have a goal, and right now you're deploying staff to equivalent of about $480,000 beyond what your goal says, could you do something differently with that money? Yes, it could reduce your general fund expenditure and could reduce your property tax levy. But as you know by now, and that we don't stop there. In fact, we prefer, we don't recommend, but we suggest strongly that, yeah, you could do that, but we also suggest strongly that could you use that money differently for kids? And some of the ideas that we suggest in there, they're just ideas. Well, could you expand on your pre-K program with more sections? Might you look at more support services for young people, which you already have a value. It's clear you have high values about support services for kids. You have counselors in every building. You have a psychologist in every building. I get excited for that because please trust us when we say this. In all the districts we work in, we don't often find that. We admire that. That's like outstanding. Are there other avenues of support for children that you've talked about, like social workers, or expanding curriculum, like foreign language in the elementary. $450,000 is about, for your district, about 5 or 6 FTEs. That can go a long way to do more for children. That's why we put it there. Do we suggest you ought to do that? No, it's your business. So we point that out to you. There are some other scenarios, there are some other things we've noticed that you may want to use funds differently. For example, you still have high school chairs. Many schools have gone away from that simply because high school chair people don't evaluate, and you know, with the new evaluation process, which is extensive, as it should be, there really is no help with that. And it's a model that often colleges use and may or may not be applicable to secondary. And each of those chairs at the high school get one period for that work, plus they get a stipend. At your middle school, they get a stipend but no period. Well, if you add up what that resource equals, could you do something differently with that money for kids? Expand program. And in fact, well, we'll point that out. Your focus group had some interesting ideas of how to expand program at the secondary. That's listed here. So you see where we're going? So this suggestion came from the folks like, gee, it would be helpful for the community, not that it locks you into that. What could be some of these ideas to use the public resources differently if you chose to, you know, re-implement or redeploy? And that's why it says here, sets of focus group members suggest that the board identify how the expenditure savings might be used to reduce the tax levy and add to the current program and services provided to the students and the community with existing financial resources. We heard that from the various discussion groups. So we wanted to document that. Okay? Done? Oh, you want me to do it? Okay. So what we did, you could see you saw the agenda of how it worked. And people wrote these things down, they put them up. And so what we have here, and you know by now we have a lot of tools. There's a lot of data with something like this. It's not a soundbite. Okay, if that's a bias, then we take blame for that. This is a matter of public policy, and it's about children. And I say that as a parent, I say that as an educator, I say that as a community member. These things can't be done lightly, and it can't be a soundbite. There's a lot of data that goes in to help people make the very best decisions they can for their kids. So there's a lot of stuff here. Can't lie to you. So what we try to do, as opposed to having to, again, we encourage people to use the original document studies, but in anything we develop, instead of people having to waste their time in hunting and looking for data, we in essence, if no one ever used any of these and they only used the report for the focus group, they could have integral, meaningful discussion, data-driven with anybody. Okay? So you see what we did starting on page 7. We in essence, it's a bit repetitive, but it's not. We put in what exactly was in the study, and you can see on page 7, we do the lay work. We do the layman work, like in a sense, if you did this compared to your enrollment projection, how much pupil capacity would you use or not use? We do that work. You have to make the value judgments, though. As Doug said, not us. So if you look at page 8, in the study, your 2 guest outsiders with our experience, and that's all it is, just experience, we provided, from our point of view, what could be some of the opportunities and challenges if you pursued scenario A. Okay? So based on the good discussion that Doug just had, the purpose of the community focus group is, that's fine and good. Guest outsiders, we did that, blah, 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 blah. Well, from the stakeholders of the community, what are opportunities and challenges we didn't identify that really should be identified in a research tool to help the board and the community have ongoing discussion of what you might want to do or might not want to do. So that's why on page 9, and we do this on purpose because this is the heart of this report. It's bigger font and it's highlighted, so it's clear. And it's important to be clear. Here are the insights of additional opportunities and challenges identified by that diverse stakeholder group that you appointed to work with us. And we do this with every one of the scenarios. The key with all of these are that these have to be data-driven, so to speak. In other words, they can't, as Doug said, it is in a form like, well, I don't like that. Well, okay, come to the board meeting, tell that to the board, and make sure you do. But for example, look at page 9, fixes some safety traffic flows to the OE building based on location. Okay, that sounds like a value judgment, but because of location and fewer, people there, that's a possible opportunity. See where I'm going? It's based on fact, and the fact being that there would be one less building there. You see where I'm, as an example? Okay, and then we do that, and we do that with each of the scenarios. Scenario B, and on page 11 are the additional opportunities and challenges identified by your community focus group. Please understand, these could have been written by many people or could have been written by one. All we know is they were resulted in the community members listening and talking to each other. It wasn't 6 people and then say, okay, let's vote on which one we put up there. We told folks, no, that's not. If you have one, and certainly talk about it, and if we say, as an example, if you believe that, no, that really is an opportunity, you may not have agreement with the rest of the discussion group. Doesn't matter. Make sure it goes up on the wall. That's important. This is not through any consensus or the important collaboration went on that your folks over 6 hours listened to each other and discussed with each other. So there was no one was put upon by, oh no, we can't put that up there. All right, by themselves. Like, no, we don't, this was not a subject of a vote. However, it's important to note again, all of these have to be data driven. That's why, for example, in the acknowledgments and the suggestions, there were a couple of folks who wrote, well, all of the scenarios do not include enough support space for the students. Well, that was inaccurate because all the scenarios do that. However, the heart of that suggestion was their concern that, okay, but whatever you do, make sure before you do it that it does not limit instructional support services for kids or services to special ed. See the importance of the distinction. That's why it's listed in that major part, all right? So scenario B, same thing on page 11. Those are the ideas of additional opportunities and challenges, and you can see the pattern.
I would just add, and with what Paul was saying, and then we'll get back to Paul, that a good example of the input of your community focus group, if you look at where Paul just was on page 11 on B, looking at the challenges, one of the challenges that came up because people knew the building so well, right at the top, OE has 8 rooms out of 23 rooms smaller than the standard 770 square feet for classroom. All right, that's an issue. Potentially, it could be a big issue because of the sizes of the 8 classrooms could impact effective delivery of instruction if enrollment did increase. Now, your enrollment projection shows it's not anticipated that you'd have that type of increase. But if it did, and then OE is one of the buildings, then as this person pointed out from the community focus group, and very rightly so, that could have an impact because 8 of those rooms are less than the 770 square. So it was a great insight that they had to put in there, and of course we recorded it.
Thanks. So 11, 12, and then you see the pattern. Scenario C on page 13, same listing of additional opportunities and challenges that the focus group saw with regard to scenario C. And some of them are stated, we didn't care how they stated it. Stated. For example, some are stated as questions. Like on page 14, possible challenges, there was no conclusion there was, but a real question. Will longer bus rides be necessary? So you see how this becomes a research tool? These are questions that are in the mind of a microcosm, 28 folks who pretty much are a microcosm of your community. So that gives you heads up. Gee, you see where I'm going, the heads up? That if that was the scenario, or one of the if That was one of the scenarios that the board focused in on. You got heads up to what a reasonable question is that you probably will want to do some homework on before you met with your community, all right? So that's why it's stated however folks wanted to state it. Some did it as questions, some did it as a statement.
Again, I would on page 17, which I think is important, where, you know, Paul had mentioned some of the concerns that people had, questions they had about the complexity of the process and the ability and the need to look at the different scenarios and all the different parts of dealing with the scenarios. But under challenges, some of the focus group people came up with at the top of 17, that here in this particular scenario, you have a 5-8 middle school instead of a 6-8. That holds a lot of ramifications as far as the changes of the structure. You've been a 6-8, and so as was rightly noted, how would teaming be affected in a 5-8? What would be this new culture of expectations for students and staff now that it's 5-8 to 6-8? Because now you have a range of pupils that's a little bit different. 6-8, now you're adding 5-8. And then, you know, really a good question, I think that, or a good point, and I think this came out from, I believe this was one of the staff, but are grades 5 and 6 elementary pupils or middle school pupils? So how do you look at that when you're doing a new middle program? If you're 5-6, you have all kinds of opportunities. Do you create a 5-6 elementary school wing and then have a 7-8 middle school as a possibility? Do you have 5th grade with simply elementary instruction, do 6-8? Do you team 5-6? Do you team 7-8? Do you do it all-inclusive 5-8? It brings out a lot of questions, and there's a lot of information that has to be looked at. And then one of the parents said, the bottom checkpoint, that if this was one of the scenarios, then clearly a major impetus that would need to be undertaken by the district was that last check. The need to educate parents about the age appropriateness of serving grade 5-8 pupils in one building. Because now you're moving what traditionally have been long-term elementary school kids up into this middle school program. And it's not like that hasn't been done. I mean, there's middle schools all over the place that have 5-8. There's some that are 7-8. There's some that are 6-8. There's some that are actually 6-9. But what it does, and I think that this is the value, one of the key values of going through this type of process with the representation that you have on a focus group, is that it opens up people's minds beyond, certainly beyond Paul's and mine as we're looking at this, with more specific information from your community that says, boy, if this is an option, what does this mean with the 5th grade involved with the middle school? And if this were an option, that a lot of time should be spent helping parents to understand the differences and the changes of this type of program. So again, it provides some great insight through this particular process.
As a follow-up to that, it's not semantics. It really isn't. It's thematic. You notice we don't use words like positive or negative. Opportunities and challenges, because some of the things Doug just talked about are listed as challenges that with deeper discussion, like the question about is 5-6 elementary or is it middle school? With deeper discussion, they aren't necessarily negative. In fact, one of the hindrances, not by anything to do with Wayne Central, has to do with the state education department. Right now you have 2 certifications in your middle school, elementary and secondary. They can't cross over. An elementary teacher cannot teach secondary courses. Secondary, cannot be responsible for elementary. So let's take that example, which is listed as a challenge. Again, it's not, we encourage you, don't look at the word challenge or opportunity as positive or negative. Okay? For example, if you did go to 5-6, and we list that in more detail, do you do departmentalized 5-6? You know, where you have, maybe elementary teachers who are strong in science, they will do the science, where those more or stronger in math would do the math, but they work together on behalf of all the children. Or do you have there's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with any of this stuff. Or you continue doing self-contained in grade 5, and maybe you have been doing sixth grade as part of a departmentalized, you might, and again, it's not a suggestion, but you see how with good discussion with community staff and board, gee, what if we did self-contained grade 6 or departmentalized grade 6? What could be in it for our kids? Maybe nothing, don't know. That's the point. It generates data-driven discussion about the most important thing you and your community do is serve your kids, okay? So it's not just semantics. There really is, and you've heard me say this, and I'm going to say it here because I can, I'm old. There are only really two black and white things in education. One of them is health and safety of kids and staff. Mathis is not going to have a community meeting or a committee if there's something wrong with the roof. He's going to make the decision that we're not going to use that building because of the health and safety of our kids and staff. And the other has to do with morals. You know, person's gone, call the DA, we'll deal with all the ramifications afterward. Other than that, really isn't a lot that's immediately black and white in serving kids. So you take the time, you have the kinds of discussions, and as I said, what grows out of what initially is listed as a challenge can often become like, wow, interesting, positive. Positive in the sense of an opportunity that we never even thought about. And that's what our goal is, to help generate that kind of collaborative decision or discussion about your kids. So,
well, I just would add to deal with that, what some districts have done, particularly as you look at this model change, say in this scenario of a 5-8, to deal with the 5-6 and the 7-8, what some places have actually done is they've looked at the model of a 7-8 middle school. They've done 5-6, and they've actually looped with the 5th and 6th to provide structure and support at that, you know, very delicate pre-adolescent age. So the kids come into 5th grade, all of their core staff teach them in 5th grade. Then the following year, when you have the 7 and 8 middle school, that 5th grade staff moves up, same group of kids, and now they're their 6th grade teachers. And then the 6th grade teachers who were there the year before, they go back down to 5th, they pick up the new 5th graders, and then they stay with the kids for 2 years. It's another way, and what it highlights through this type of process, and as Paul succinctly said, it really highlights the idea of the opportunities and challenges, because to many people, it's a huge challenge of the youngsters that are 5th graders being in a middle school. So what some districts have said is, we hear that, we understand that, so how can we provide, you know, the best instruction possible for our kids and still be cost effective? And that's one of the ways that some people have looked at it. So it highlights that whole issue of opening your eyes up for you and the community and making sure that we're looking at everything is, you know, yes, these are challenges, but then these are potentially opportunities.
And then on page 20, there were two, as we call them, adaptation ideas, and they're documented here. Now, we document them, and we've modeled for you in how we've presented the various scenarios that you may want to go back and do the same mathematics with regard to pupil capacity and enrollment to see if they really would work. But it's important that they be documented here, that we had some folks who felt that, gee, here are a couple of adaptations that we should list. So we did that, and they're there. Okay?
Do you have the closing?
Yeah.
We're going to take questions in just a second from the board, but you know, we have something, as we were talking about, just the conclusion of this. We have a section from our study that we just thought was really important, and I asked Paul if he would share that with you before we open up for questions.
Yeah, the value judgment, and that's what it really is, that balances how each program scenario, either here or another one that you adapt or come up with, that might best serve the pupils of Wayne Central, and how each option might best reduce operating expenditures must rest with you and the board, along with your community together. The value judgment, and we're very religious with this, and we said that the first night we met. If you're expecting us to recommend and suggest what you should do, we're not going to do that. We never have, and we've done many, many of these studies. Because it's your kids, it's your community, it's your money. The value judgment should not rest with guest consultants. What we try to provide you, and is our tools, real data-driven tools. They aren't sound bites. There's a lot of data that goes into running a school system. And all of us have gone to school so we all can run a school system, right? We've all learned that. Well, possibly. But there's so much that goes into providing quality instruction, safe instruction, and deploying talented staff as best as possible to serve children with finite public resources. It's not a blank check for anybody, even the most wealthy of districts in the state. It's not a blank check. Anyway, so what we've provided, we believe, to you and others in the state when we do these things, the enrollment projection, how many clients might you have? Important factor, because that's what we do. We serve kids. The other thing is the pupil capacity of your existing buildings without any renovations or additions. What do you got to be able to serve within your values? That the values being your class sizes. And a study that came that included visits to your school, listening to folks, looking at master schedules, asking loads of questions of your folks. And so what we tried to provide you are tools and a roadmap, just a roadmap, to help the local policy discussion. I don't know, I know how to get here, but I call her Marcia. My GPS, I call her Marcia. I like Marcia talking to me, so I plugged it in. Real story, Marcia, she initially says, get off 3 exits down the road and come up the back way. I didn't do that, all right? I kept going. They said, then you get off at the next one at Victor. I didn't do that. I go to 490 and up. Sounds like a long way, but I like highways. And I guess that's the point. It's a roadmap, not a specific route, but a roadmap from which you can choose together in collaboration with data-driven discussion. Don't misunderstand. Decisions about kids can't just be about data. It can't just be about emotion either. There's a stewardship here that you have undertaken and all the great salary you get as board members. Anyway, there's a responsibility of stakeholders of the public resources that you've been given to provide this service. So, it's a roadmap to help local public policy discussion necessary to identify, develop an option, if any, for Wayne Central to implement. Local people, local knowledge will make it successful for Wayne. We thank you so much for allowing us to work with you. We respectfully, we work with a lot of folks in the state. Mathis, you're a class act. We appreciate working with you. We appreciate working with your staff. All of the data, for example, we get all of this data from the people that have to be responsible for it. Like all the data about how the building's used came from your principals, not from us running around with little pieces of paper. Because when we're not here, if you've got a question about how a room is going to be used, you got to ask the CEO of that building, and that's called the principal. So all this information came from your folks who work daily with your children. So we believe it's accurate. We believe it's complete, is humanly possible with a lot of people being involved. So again, thank you so much. We wish you well as you proceed to decide what might be best for your children and for your future, and as you use, again, local people, local knowledge to identify what's best for your kids. Thanks so much. Doug?
Yeah, so that concludes the work on the focus group, and so you have that report, your community has the report. For this last research tool, were there any questions from the board on the focus group? Anything that we can pick up on or not?
Doug, can you answer a question for me?
Sure.
Is there a formula that you go by that you can anticipate how many children would be in a home? Excuse me, I've had a cold for a couple weeks. Let's say there were 40 new homes built in our catchment, Wayne Central.
Okay.
Is there a formula that you can determine? Because I think what some are maybe failing to understand is if you have 40 new homes, doesn't mean that everybody's going to have 2.2 children.
Correct.
And that they're all going to be school age at the same time. But is there a formula that's out there? I know people are not having 4, 5, 6 kids in one household. The average, everybody knows it is like 1.7 or 2.2 or whatever it is, depending on where you live. But what formula would you use if there were, I know you said we needed like 100 new homes to really make a difference, but what formula or how is that derived?
I'll answer that. And for those of you who have the study,
It's in
and
the
if you
projection.
don't, we'll just tell, page 29 of the enrollment projection study, it gives you a snapshot of school district demographics. And as you know, we like to provide all data, not just snapshots. So in the appendix of the study, we give you hundreds of demographic information about your district. But let's answer this question. For example, in 2015, if you look at total households, because you really don't know until somebody moves into it. Is it going to be an empty nester like Joyce and Paul with a schnauzer or a horse? I don't know, codes. You can't come. Anyway, you don't know. So we know we're going to have 40 new households. So in your school, see, we like to use data about your school district. The assumption is that you will attract people similar in values, culture, and household type that you already have. Unless there's some major criteria, okay? Or for example, unless, and this happens, that it's patio homes only for people 65 years and older. Barring that, you have to assume it's America, right? People buy it and live in it. So if we use your data, in 2015, every household in Wayne Central School, if you take all the households divided by the number of children you have in your school district, you had 0.4 children per household. Well, no, Paul, this guy's going to make them family households. They're going to be family homes. So, in 2015, all of the homes identified by the census as family households in Wayne Central School District had 0.51 pupils. Okay? No, Paul. No. These are going to be family households with children under 18. Because that's what the developer's marketing, which is sometimes the case. Well, if that's the case, using your data, see where we're going? It's really based, some demographers use national data. Well, nothing against Texas, but what's happening here where we live, all right, where you serve children. Anyway, so if they were all these households, all these 40, were going to be purchased by family households with their own children under 18, on average, you'd have 1.29 pupils in that household. That's your highest estimate. So if we look at it conservatively, see what, and that's conservative, 40 times 1.29, 40 plus, who's good at math? I'm just an old English teacher. Matt, help me out. Anyway, 10, thank you. So you're looking at probably 50 children from age 0 to age 18. They're not all in school yet. So that would be, right, 13 plus 5, 18 years, right, 18 into 50. You're looking at, on average, until they move in, you really don't know. On average, you're looking at every one of those years, right, from 0 to 18, right, 18 into 50. You're looking at, let's round up, you're looking at what, 2.5 potential per age year, right? Did I do that right?
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So that means those 40 homes at best would probably provide in K through 6, that's 7 years, okay, 7 times 2.5, 14 and a half, 14, right? 14, 17 and a half kids. Well, let's round up. 18 children for 7 years. So that is about 2 to 3 children per grade level. That's why when we do the study, we show that range of low to mid. And when we do the capacity analysis, there's a spread. So you can say, well, if that did happen, the 40 homes, would we have room for them? And I think those charts, by looking at that, you can answer yay or nay based on the scenarios and the data, how we provide it to you, to be able to figure that out. See how it works? So it's based on your school district. Now, the only where this doesn't work is if sometimes this happens, that somebody will build, like I said, for just senior citizens. I don't like that. Just empty nesters without kids. Well, you got to be careful of that. Some developers say, well, it won't have any effect on the school. You see, even if somebody was building 40 empty nester homes, okay, I would still be conservative and estimate 40 times at least 0.51. Here's why. Because what we have learned, there's a high need by empty nesters like me for patio-type homes. And what we've also learned, particularly since 2001 with that terrible thing that happened in New York City, there's a pattern in our culture that, don't get me wrong, people still move to Florida, don't get me wrong, they still move to wherever, but there's more of a tendency that, wait, why do I gotta move? My family's here, my doctors are here, I got Wegmans. Yeah, okay, I think I'll just go get an apartment for 3 months in Florida, but I'm gonna still live here. That's a real pattern if you ask your realtors throughout the state. So where I'm going is, even if it was specifically for senior citizens, I would still estimate some impact, because you see why some of your people who have family-size homes now would potentially sell them, right? 3-bedroom homes is typically, therefore, who buys a 3-bedroom home? Unless you get a lot of train sets, it's somebody that has kids or wants kids, right? And then they would go into there. Now that sounds terribly conservative, maybe overzealous, but you know what? You got, until it happens, you got to be conservative. So I would recommend, for example, if you built 40 patio homes, I would think you may get 15 or so kids, possibly. Not out of those homes, but because people want to live here, and they buy that, and they sell their family-sized home. All right? And not to go on and on, I've answered your question, but when you get a chance, look at the demographics, because I think, and again, some of the demographics in particular, I think, for example, the median age in Wayne County is 42.7 years. The median age in Wayne Central is 45.3. Well, what's that mean? Big deal. Well, it's kind of a big deal, not a big deal. The federal census looks at the upper limit of childbearing years of being 44. So you have a higher median age than the county as a whole for your school district. Will that pattern continue? Because if it does continue, I'm not saying it will, we got to see what happens with the new census. See what I mean? If that pattern continues, then that means existing residents likely won't be as big a source of new children to serve as folks who move in. On the other hand, if you don't have developers wanting to build for whatever reason, you see the chicken or egg? You won't attract those in what is considered childbearing years. See how circular that gets? Does that help a little bit, maybe? Okay, thanks.
I have one question. The 150 to 200 homes is like the thing that really changes the school district, correct?
Well,
I mean,
yes and no. For example, well, all right, it's a matter of public record.
if they're family homes.
It's a matter of public record. I just finished working with your neighbor, Penfield. And as you know, Oud Homes is building right now as we speak about 200 and some, and they have it's public knowledge, so I'm not saying anything that isn't public. And they also have first dibs on the other golf course to develop another 200 and some homes. And that study I did for them is online, I believe. Mark Santucci, the assistant superintendent, put it online for his community. The answer is yes, that has impact, especially given what the marketing for those homes are in the particular setting. The mere act of building those homes doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get kids, but if they're marketed and the school district has a reputation that attracts folks with kids, then in all likelihood there'll be significant numbers of kids. And that's what that Penfield study shows. So you really have to have a high number of homes to make a difference.
Well, the reason I say that is because like in our town, well, it seems to be the thing is 30 to 40 homes in a development. So if we have 4 to 5 30 to 40 developments going on, which we have at least 3 right now going on with that many homes, that would make an impact.
Well, it could. I guess yes. However, I can only go back to the data. When I interviewed your codes people, that's not what I was told is happening.
Right. Now, these are things that are just starting to come to
Well,
light.
you see, that's...
And you don't have that
Yeah,
information
you see,
now.
I agree with you. Remember the glass half full, that goes into the glass could be overflowing, and that's outstanding. You got to keep watching that. Many school districts, in fact, I encourage them, they actually have the codes people come visit and have a cup of coffee yearly at a meeting to say what's happening. And that's why I asked the codes folks, okay, what's the talk on the street? Because if you've built a deck, you've called your codes person before you do it or before you fill out the form. You hear what I mean? So if you're a developer, you've already started working with your planning folks before you fill out the request to do the project. I said, do you have any of those happening? And the answer, well, I reported here what the answer is. So watch that. And the other issue is, well, that could happen in 8 or 10 years. You're right. You can't make decisions of 3, 5, and 8 years out with something that might happen 8 years from now. But you're right. Watch it at least yearly and encourage. Again, many school districts have the folks come in, and it's a friendly discussion. So you're well informed. And one thing I've learned about codes folks throughout the state, they really appreciate when municipalities, particular boards, tap them for their knowledge. Honest to God, they'll be here a drop of a hat. Yeah, they really care about helping people. But to go that far out is not enough data to drive decisions that you kind of you're faced with, I guess.
And then I just have one other thing. And what I understand from the people, the public saying, when you sit there and say 5 through 8, that's 10 through 13-year-olds. That doesn't sound too bad. But when you say 7 through 12, that doesn't sound bad until you say 13 to 18-year-olds. That kind of scares me a little bit, too.
Well, that's sure. And that's really your discussion as a family. That's why we always say at this time, it's time for guest outsiders to go home. No, seriously, this is a real family discussion. Things like that. It's a real family discussion. I could sit here and say, but 7 through 12 is pretty common in this state, not only in smaller districts, but I'm not going to go there and say that because it doesn't matter. It's your perspective of what you just said in discussion as a community family about what you think is best for your kids. And whatever decision in the end you all make, it's going to be the right one. It really is.
Thank you.
Okay?
We've had the opportunity to work with you for the past 5, 6 months. I thought we did a very good job of vetting you before we asked you to help our district. These are folks who do not know you. Would you please tell these folks who the guest outsiders are, what your educational and experiential background is?
Well, yeah, I'm a dad of 3 sons, a firm believer in public school education, a lovely wife. We have schnauzers. That's the important part of my life, what I just shared with you. And I'm a grandfather with 3 grandkids and want more, and I put an order in, and hopefully it'll happen. And my last son's getting married on April 1st. I know, April 1st? Yes, April 1st. I'm an English teacher by trade and a social studies by trade. Started in a very, very small school district, very poor, small school district as an English teacher. Went on to become a senior high school principal, a superintendent, and a deputy district superintendent at BOCES. I've had the opportunity to serve many communities, most of them, in fact all of them, without a lot of means, which meant that every penny had to be, and was, thank you. And I know some board meetings it was difficult. Like, what? We're going to spend $100 on what? No, seriously. But that's important because we didn't have a lot of resource, and that making sure that every penny went directly for kids as we can. Did that for, oh my God, over 45 years. And since, for the past 8 years, 9 years? 8 years.
Almost 9.
Almost 9 years, Doug Exley and I were colleagues. We have another colleague. We did a series of merger studies throughout the state from Southampton, which is an interesting culture, to way up in the Adirondacks where I think we got caught in more than one snowstorm. We weren't sure we were going to be home.
Northville and Mayfield,
yeah.
if anybody knows.
So that's what not only our careers, we've been fortunate to work with a lot of wonderful communities, work with a lot of wonderful kids and a lot of wonderful boards, and we always lived in the communities that we worked in, because that's what we valued. And that's enough of me. Doug?
Just real quickly, Doug Exley. I know the area a little bit because both of my children had an outstanding education at Brockport, and my son is in the police force in Colorado Springs. My daughter stayed in the area. She's a director through Strong Memorial Hospital. She's in the addictive studies program, so she went from Brockport, did her master's actually at the U of R at the Warner School, so she stayed right at home here and now works in Rochester. So I have the two kids. My wife was a longtime educator, college professor. I was a longtime teacher in a place called Norwich, New York, if any of you know Norwich. I was a middle school principal. Probably many of you know Cooperstown for a very important reason.
Baseball.
Go Cubs. And Sherburne-Oroville, I was a principal, and then I was a superintendent for 15 years in a merged district in Gilbertsville, Mount Upton. So I know a little bit about emotions. I know a little bit about how difficult decisions are in districts, and particularly when you're looking at things like you're looking at that impact your kids and their program, the staff, buildings, and all of that. So I think I bring that to the table as Paul and I work together, understanding how important these decisions are. And I think that's really driven Paul's and my philosophy that we are unlike most consultants that you have. Most consultants come in and they tell you what to do. They'll do the research and then they'll do presentations like this, and then they'll say, well, based upon our information, we think you should be doing A, B, C, D, E. And I think because of my experience and my work with Paul that our model really is get as much information as we possibly can on the table and then let the people, the community, and the leadership teams really wrestle with that data and come up with decisions on what to do. And as Paul said, we've had the opportunity, we've been at all corners of the state. We've been, as Paul mentioned, we've worked down on Long Island. We've worked, Northville, Mayfield, Central New York, Albany, Kenmore, Tonawanda, out in Buffalo. So the experience we bring is working with rural, suburban, urban districts, and hopefully we've been able to share that with you in a positive manner. But it's been our privilege to work with you, and you have a wonderful leadership team, and you're wrestling with difficult decisions, and certainly our best wishes as you move forward with this difficult work. Thank you.
Okay. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Again, whatever you decide, it'll be the right decision. It just will be. So, take care. Take care. Thank you.